Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's. At Local Joe's, we help local business. Hi, this is Chris Smith with Local Joe's.
This is City Pulse Newsmakers, a weekly look at the issues and the people behind them in Greater Lansing. Brought to you by City Pulse, Lansing's weekly alternative newspaper. And now, here's your host, City Pulse publisher, Burl Schwartz.
Good morning. The topic today is medical marijuana dispensaries. They've become a big business in the city of Lansing, but a court ruled 5 years ago that they're all illegal. Even the mayor, who's very pro-marijuana, is calling for a moratorium on them and an ordinance to regulate them. That's our topic today. With us is City Councilwoman Carol Wood. Welcome back, Carol.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Melissa Kwan-Huber, representing Rejuvenating South Lansing. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
And Joshua Covert, who's an attorney, an East Lansing attorney who specializes in medical marijuana law. Thanks for being here, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, Carol, by an educated count, there might be as many as 70 dispensaries in the city of Lansing. And obviously, there are forces that want to allow as many of them as the system will allow, and there are others who say enough is enough, including the mayor. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I learned more about medical marijuana than I thought I would ever need to know, and went back as chair of the Public Safety Committee when we created our first ordinance for licensing in June of 2011. And then, as we are all well aware of, we had the McQueen case, and the city attorney at that time sent a letter out to all dispensaries that we had information on, telling them that we would not be doing the licensing ordinance and that they were open at their own peril. Since then, we had reduced the number around the city to around 20 that we saw that stayed open. From neighborhoods to council, we've been asking, how do we enforce? How do we move forward? And back in December, Rejuvenating South Lansing gave us a petition with several hundred signatures from the community saying, either enforce the ordinance that you have on the books, create one that you can enforce, or close down the ones if you're saying that they're not supposed to be legal. And I support the fact that we have an enforceable ordinance that allows patients to be able to get their medical marijuana in a safe, secure facility. But I also believe that we have too many currently in the city. And when we looked at this years ago, we also, at that time, determined that there needed to be a cap on the number of medical marijuana.
And there was in that
yes,
ordinance,
there was
48, I believe.
Correct.
And why would that be okay with you?
Well, I didn't support the 48 back then. I supported a number closer to 12 at that time, based on the data that we had received about the number of patients that were in Ingham and Eaton County, and again, how many could be represented by a particular pharmacy, dispensary. But I think what we're looking at is, again, a number that have come back into the city, a number of new ones that have opened, and people have said to me, well, why regulate? And I think of all the businesses out there, there isn't one business that isn't regulated some way. Whether I'm a hairdresser, a barber, whether I am a liquor store or a restaurant, whether I am a car repair shop, all of them have some type of regulation. And many of them also have regulations based on zoning, on where they can be based on the zoning component. And so I am supportive of of trying to look at something that is a comprehensive study of all of those issues, along with looking at a cap.
Okay, and Melissa, some would argue let the capitalist system resolve this, and inevitably some of these places are going to go out of business. Well, why not? What is going on in South Lansing that has you concerned?
Well, I think there are a number of things that people have been concerned about, and where you live also kind of depends. You can be affected by this issue in different ways. We have some people who live in more smaller areas, and they might have more proximity to these places where you have lots of people and customers coming. What I think we felt from the South Lansing side is that there is a compassion for the patients, and people have said, I supported the vote. I voted for medical marijuana so that people could have access to this. I mean, who among us hasn't been affected by cancer or other things and might want this for ourselves or our loved ones? But then the issue that people feel somewhat dismayed that they didn't realize what would all come with voting for this particular law that would allow the dispensaries, and that people feel like we voted so that people can have access to medical care, not that we were going to vote to make sure that businesses had the right to open and have profits and that sort of thing. The vote was for the concerns of the patients, not the business owners. So I think that's where folks are coming from.
Are there problems in South Lansing, though? Are there complaints that something is disrupting a neighborhood, or what is the concern? Yeah, well, I think probably Carol will get the bulk of the concerns that come from those kind of things.
Oh,
we hear
yes.
it across from the city, and I think those from and Rejuvenating South Lansing also has connections with our north neighbors, and they have a lot congested right around where they live, which is a big problem as traffic comes in and out that may become questionable. So a zoning problem. Primarily, are there problems? For example, I heard the other day about a dispensary in South Lansing that someone had complained that customers were smoking pot behind it, watching kids playing soccer, and the dispensary owner said that's absolutely untrue. Yeah, I think we've heard of that. I'll defer to Carol on some of those comments. We have heard that she hears it citywide. We hear a little bit on the south side.
And your characterization is absolutely right. In fact, I've been by there. I've witnessed some of the things that have gone on. That particular establishment has also had tour buses that come through with groups of people coming in and sampling different products that are there. Now, I'm not going to say all dispensary owners are bad, because there is a great deal of people that are very conscientious about what they're doing, how they're dispensing the product, and making sure that it's in a safe, clean environment. But there are, just like any place else, bad players that are out there. And based on that, when you look at the proximity between near the soccer field that's there, when you look at some of the other issues that we've seen dealing with dispensaries, when we were looking at it back in 2011 on the east side, we saw an actual uptick in the breaking and enterings in and around medical marijuana facilities. That data was brought to us at the council at that time, before some of these dispensaries opened, and then after they were open, some of the things that are carrying on. And again, just like anything else, just like a doctor that might prescribe over-the-counter, or might prescribe prescription painkillers, there are some that do the right job, understand, work with their patients. There are some that don't do the right job.
Let me ask Josh, you represent a lot of dispensary owners and of course know the law backward and forward. What's your response to their concerns?
Well, as far as the number of dispensaries, I would agree that I think the market should control how many dispensaries. I think that provides the best medicine for patients when we have a competitive industry. And I think anytime we try to control the number of dispensaries, the end result is going to be that patients aren't going to have access to the quality and cost-effective medication that they need. I think if we were to enact a number of like 12, for instance, I certainly think prices would go up for the patients, and a lot of patients that I work with and know are on fixed incomes and have like a disability, and that's why they use the medicine. So an increase in the price of medicine for those individuals would be a big problem. And so I think the best way to make sure patients have access to their medicine is to allow the free market to control the number of dispensaries. I mean, I can understand zoning concerns and that sort of thing, but I don't see us really talking about where pharmacies are in the town and how many pharmacies we have. And I think it's the same thing. This is a medical issue. We're getting medicine for patients. And I think if this was a recreational topic that we were talking about, something maybe down the road, I could maybe see a little bit more concern. But when we're talking about patients, I think we need to keep that in focus. And they should be our #1 concern when looking at the number of dispensaries and how we regulate them.
Is part of the issue here, if I may throw in, that putting aside the fact that the appeals court upheld by the Supreme Court said the dispensaries are illegal, that with, let's say, yeah, they are legal, but the attitude of the police, and I have to believe this comes from the mayor's office, is just leave them alone. And isn't that a real problem for these dispensaries, that the bad apples aren't getting cracked down on? And the good ones may be put out of business by an artificial limit.
Well, I mean, that's not really, I guess, what I've seen, though, here. I have seen some dispensaries get cracked down on, so to speak.
By
the bad apples.
By the local
Yeah, by
police?
local Lansing Police Department.
Okay.
It was maybe about a year and a half ago, Lansing Police Department did a sting operation where they went out to 8 different dispensaries that they had heard were selling to people without cards. They went to 8 of them, only one place sold without a card. And they did go ahead and arrest that individual and charge him with a crime. So I think Lansing Police Department has been trying to weed out the bad apples. There really aren't any, maybe one.
Really? Okay, Carol, you were going to respond.
A couple of things. First, I want to go back to the pharmacy issue. Having been on council, we have had, there was a series of pharmacies that wanted to come into the city of Lansing, and they had 4 or 5 different locations. Council looked very carefully at that because some of those had to deal with rezoning. And we said that they were too close in proximity to some of the other pharmacies that were there. So we have looked at pharmacies. You know, it isn't as if those have not been looked at. Second of all,
How does that help, saying we have to eliminate some pharmacies?
Well,
what's wrong with having one? I mean, I see Rite Aid across the street from Walgreens, across the street from CVS. I mean, what's wrong with that?
well, and I can give you a number of those that when the rezoning went through that now are no longer in business because they didn't have the plan to make sure that that was an effective location and a marketing study that made sure that that worked. And now our Dollar Generals are, you know, a number of other things, or vacant buildings. We have the Rite Aid over on the south end that has been closed on Waverly, in the Waverly area for some time. You have the, it was Arbor Drug that was over on Willow and Martin Luther King that's now a Dollar General. Those are all part of some rezoning.
What's wrong with Dollar General?
I'm not saying that there isn't anything wrong, but that's not what
Right.
it was rezoned for, and that's not what we were told that was going in there, or the marketing. I think the point that I was trying to make is the issue is, you know, council does look at those things when they do come to us, and we look at the proximity and we look at the marketing strategies. But as to your comments dealing with the police department, there have been a number of complaints. We've passed them on from a council perspective, from a neighborhood perspective, of some of the bad apples that are out there, and, you know, heard back that one, we don't necessarily always have the resources to go out there and deal with them, especially when we were down 25 police officers. We also have heard that there have been cases that have been brought at that time to the city attorney, and they were not, they didn't go through the judicial system, or warrants weren't issued. So, you know, I do think that there are issues out there, and I do believe that some of it does have to do with what the perception is of whether the city is supporting or not supporting medical marijuana dispensaries. And lastly, I think the thing that's critical through this whole discussion is, what are we dealing with right now? What is the law that is before us, and how do we effectuate that? Right now, dispensaries are considered illegal. You can have a caregiver go into a commercial building and deal with their 5 patients. You could have several caregivers go into a commercial building dealing with their patients. I wish the legislature would do something.
Right.
You know, I think we all around this table would like to see them step up, do their job. But in the meantime, without them moving forward, we have received, from a council perspective, numerous complaints, numerous concerns about it, and so we have to look at what avenues that we have both available to us that, again, is something that's enforceable.
And I think on top of that is we should remember that Lansing isn't reinventing, or we're not starting something new here. This has been done around the state and in other states. I mean, Ypsilanti has had caps, and they've been working fine for 5 years. You know, they have like a cap of 7. And I think it's important for us to go back to remembering that we're trying to meet the needs for the patients in our community. And I want to talk about that market that you were talking about. We're so far away from maybe a market for our community, an appropriate sized number of dispensaries for us, because in Ingham County we have 68 pharmacies for the entire county, and pharmacies serve the general population, and for Ingham County that is 282,000 people. We only have less than 7,000 cardholders for the entire county. So what's the market that we're serving?
When you're talking about pharmacies, you're talking about prices that are largely controlled through insurance. Here, Josh is making the point that there are no guarantees for medical marijuana patients that they're going to get a good price. You reduce it to 7 or 12, you're reducing competition. Are you prepared, if you agree with her on this argument, are you prepared to say, and we're going to cap the price of marijuana to make sure patients are paying a lot more than they are now?
There's nothing in the law that is before us that allows the sale of medical marijuana. What the law says is that you can compensate a caregiver for what they believe the cost it was to grow that. That's not a matter of selling it. If I have 5 patients that I'm working with, and what my time and effort is in growing that is determined what will be paid, but there's no checks and balances on that.
You're saying we can't do this because it's not in the law, but the fact is they're all illegal, as you just said. So why are you trying to regulate something that's illegal? Why aren't you telling the police, put them out of business? We've
been telling them that. Absolutely. I have made that statement over and over again. I have also made the statement to the Attorney General's office and saying, you know, we have your opinion out here. We have the appellate court. You drive our streets just like we do every day. You see that those are open. If you believe that they're illegal, why aren't you also stepping up and trying to close these down?
All right. Josh, on this price issue, if there are 12 of them, is it really going to make much of a difference in price?
I certainly think it would. I've seen prices come down quite a bit since they have opened up post-McQueen. For a while there, when there was only a handful, prices weren't what they are now today. I can say today, right now, from going around and visiting different dispensaries, that you can get very cost-effective medicine right now, and that wasn't the case post-McQueen.
This is all a prelude to what's going to be a much bigger issue, because eventually in Michigan it will be, recreational marijuana will be legal. You know, the city of Amsterdam has done very well essentially by looking the other way, because marijuana isn't legal in that country, in Denmark. But what would be wrong with a city that embraced it, that said, yes, you can smoke it in coffee shops, you can do this, you can do that, instead of this attitude that no, it's just for patients, and let's forget about the fact that 60% of people use it.
The thing I find so amusing about that statement is when you look at the fact that Ingham County passed an ordinance that said you cannot have secondhand smoke in bars and restaurants, and that there was even an issue with Sparrow Hospital trying to regulate smoking in and around their facility. But we're going to turn around and just generally say, well, you know, it's all right to have medical marijuana out there and in the public and every place else.
Do you have any evidence secondhand smoke from marijuana is dangerous?
I have no evidence on that, and I'm not a doctor to be able to determine that. But again, I find it amusing that there's some of these regulations that are out there dealing with a controlled product that is something that can be sold and used in across the United States versus the fact that individual states making determinations on this particular plant.
Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there is an exception right now for the anti-smoking that, in tobacco shops or cigar shops, you can smoke in that facility. So I think it would be no different to accept medical marijuana establishments from allowing the use. It would be very similar to that, which happens right now. Or recreational when it comes along. So I think, we do have exceptions now for the smoking inside for certain establishments, and I don't think it would be that challenging to have those same exceptions for medical marijuana establishments.
Melissa and Carol, how much of a divide do you think there is in public opinion over the use of marijuana in the city of Lansing, and what role is that playing in
medical or
both?
Other? We have a range of, I think, of opinions on some of that, but I think folks are mostly concerned about what the impact is on our community when we have a lot of unregulated businesses and we have these things that are creating the issues. I don't think people are so much concerned about the use of marijuana right now. It's like that's not on their minds as much as what is this doing to my community right now, having these particular structures in my community, many, many, many of them.
Carol, you're seen as a champion of the neighborhoods, but what about this? Is there a divide, and do you see much resistance to marijuana, or just to how it is being playing out in our community?
I think it's more so how it's playing out in the community. I mean, people that have been addressing this for a number of years have not talked about the legalization of marijuana, period. What they've talked about is the issues currently around medical marijuana, and I don't think there's anybody at this table that will disagree with the fact that the legislation that we are currently working with is such a gray, mucked up mess that it makes it very difficult to understand what the regulations are and how to effectuate those. And if we would have had something much clearer and much more distinct, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. But we are, and again, I agree with Melissa. I think it is similar to what we have heard, especially through neighborhoods, is driving down my corridor, and between liquor stores, medical marijuana, and check cashing places, that is an attitude that is put out there that has an impact on whether people are going to come off the corridors back into the neighborhoods. And I think it's how we address those, how we deal with those. You have, again, establishments that aren't having neon signs and blow-up dolls out in front of them, and you have some that have signs that say, there are weapons on premise. So there's the whole variety that's out there. The majority of people in the neighborhoods have said that they want to make sure that patients have access, safe access, to medical marijuana in a way that does not have a negative impact in the community.
Joshua, do you think what's going on now has a negative impact in the community, on the community?
I don't believe so. I mean, I've seen a positive impact. I know most of the businesses that have started as dispensaries were vacant before the dispensary moved into there. At least a large percentage of those. It's also creating jobs for the. I mean, I did an estimate. There's probably about 350 people employed at the dispensaries here in Lansing. That doesn't cover caregivers and other people that may benefit from, economically benefit from the dispensary. I've talked to landlords that rent the dispensaries and said, hey, I wasn't able to rent this building before. Now I'm able to. So I think it provides a positive effect in rented out buildings, more jobs for the community.
I know, Melissa, not on the south end, but on the north end, I know of a dispensary owner who has 3 buildings he owns. He is one he operates out of, one he uses to process his products, and the other one simply because he's afraid he's too close to another dispensary and may have to move. But he's paying taxes, property taxes, and $300,000 worth of property to the city of Lansing. South End probably has a higher percentage of empty storefronts than the rest of Lansing. What about that? They are bringing business. They are paying landlords. They are paying property tax.
Yeah.
Do you want to see that reduce?
Well, I think our neighborhoods are saying we don't want to just have any kind of development in our neighborhoods. We have a master plan, we have community visioning processes that all have laid out where we'd like to go in the future and how we'd like to see our community grow. And I don't think that I've ever seen anyone say I really would like to have medical marijuana dispensaries as part of that package. So in thinking about the trade-offs, I think people are willing to say we'd like to move in a different direction, and having this many medical marijuana dispensaries might limit the other options of other businesses who want to come into our community that we might prefer more or to have in a different ratio of what we currently have.
All right, Josh, any reaction?
Well, I mean, I think just in general, I think one of the reasons we're kind of here and talking about this is that only the negative sides of dispensaries generally get brought up to somebody that works for a neighborhood organization or for the city council. Quite often somebody doesn't call up to their city council member and say, hey, there's this new dispensary down the road from my house that I can actually walk to and get great medicine. Those kinds of calls generally don't get made. So I think we're kind of dealing partially with part of the information. We're dealing with a lot of the complaints, and I don't think the good stories have really been exposed or been brought out, because generally people call up to their city council member to complain, not to say that, hey, there's a great new dispensary. Yeah. So I think if we had a bit more information about people that lived in the neighborhoods and liked the dispensaries, I think we would see that it's a pretty balanced in terms of people that do or do not like them. I don't think it's all one-sided by any means.
Carol, before we go, obviously the moratorium is going to pass. What about an ordinance, a new ordinance regulating dispensaries? Is that going to happen in the near future, do you think?
Well, as you indicated, May 12th at 5 p.m. at the council chambers, we will be holding the public hearing on the moratorium, and council will be voting on it that same night. On the 13th, the very next day at 3:30, the Public Safety Committee will start going through the draft ordinance that has been given to us by the City Attorney's Office that they believe is enforceable with the current laws that we have on the books to be able to enforce some type of licensing process.
All right. And do you think the majority of council members favor regulating?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Very good. Well, we're about out of time. Very interesting discussion. I want to thank all three of you. Melissa Kwan-Huber from Rejuvenating South Lansing, Carol Wood, who chairs the Public Safety Committee that's dealing with this issue, Joshua Covert, an East Lansing attorney who specializes in marijuana laws. And a quick reminder, if you're looking for something to do on this Derby Saturday, City Pulse is hosting a Derby party at Midtown Brewing. The doors open at 4 p.m. I'd love to see you there. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.